Audio recording for this meeting has begun.
Hello and welcome to today's teleconference. At this time, we are currently waiting for all the participants to arrive. Thank you for your patience and please continue to hold.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dr. Dane Marco Di Cesare and I'm the Data Manager and Coordinator at the New York State RTI Technical Assistance Center. I'll be facilitating the webinar today and I have a few reminders for you. All upcoming professional development offerings are listed on our webpage, nysrti.org. A copy of today's PowerPoint is available on the webpage. During today's presentation, please use the chat box for any questions or comments that you may have. At the end of today's presentation, there will be a link to a brief evaluation. We are very pleased to have Amy Piper with us today to present our second webinar in the Strand 19 series, RTI Implementation at the Administrative Level. Yes, it's still a thing. Today's topic is a good look at the tiers and using data to make good decisions. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for spending your Thursday afternoon with me. I don't know how the weather is with all of you, but here it's pretty dreary, so this is a good place to be. As Dane stated, we're going to talk about RTI, and this is the second webinar in the series about talking about RTI implementation at the administrative level. I'd really like to encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar so I make sure that I meet your needs as they come up, and any questions or clarifications that you might need as we go through the information. All right. So, and the learning targets for this session, at the end of the session, and during this session, participants will review the pillars of each tier. So we'll talk about Tier 1 and Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, as far as implementation of RTI, the use of benchmark assessments, goal setting, progress monitoring, interventions, and best practices necessary at each tier to improve student achievement. I'd also like to talk with you about administration and how administrators will be given an overview of database decision-making and how this impacts effective implementation of RTI. We'll look at database decision-making meetings and how they can be run in an efficient and effective way to best meet the time demands of teachers, parents, and administrators. So just a little bit about myself and my background. I am the elementary principal at Fredonia School District. I've been the elementary principal. This is my 7th year. Prior to that, I was a special ed director and director of student services. Community here at Fredonia is about 11,000 residents. We have about 1,600 students grades K through 12, and I have about 600 students in my building. My building consists of kindergarten through 4th grade. And I also oversee the UPK program, which is in a separate building. We are in the southwest portion of Buffalo, and you can see a little bit about our demographics on that slide. Prior to coming to Fredonia Schools, I was a school psychologist for about 18 years throughout Ohio, particularly in the Cincinnati and Cleveland area, as well as in western New York. I was fortunate enough to be actually the very first Ames Web trainer a long time ago when Ames Web first was developed by Mark Chin and Gary Gurman under the name of Edformation. So I've been collecting data and doing decision-making for a long time. We started in Ohio with the response to intervention model, but we called it the intervention-based evaluation in Ohio back in the early 2000s. So I have had some practices in that sense. So just to talk a little bit about how to get to know you and to know who's here with us, we're going to share some polls here, if you would take a few minutes and just let us know who you are. All right, we almost have everybody answered there. Almost have everybody on board. So it looks like building principal, district administrator, and most of you have an intermediate level of RTI implementation at your district. That's very helpful because that will help me to know where to lead you, but also I really encourage you to ask questions about anything that I suggest or talk about so there's clarification and you can have a better use of this information in your particular school or district. Great. All right. So one approach to RTI is a 4-tier model, and I'm sure most of you have seen the 4-tier versus the 3-tier model for RTI. Here at Fredonia and at several of the districts that I worked at and worked with, we like to use the 4-tier model because we like to include the CSE special education students in with the RTI model because we really want to monitor the progress of those students as well, and we found that keeping them on the 4-tier model, they're not pushed by the wayside. We include them with our database decision making. Tier 3 are students that are receiving 1-on-2 or 1-on-3 instruction, and as I mentioned last week, for those of you who are here, that's really our students that are below the 10th percentile in Ames Web Plus, really functioning well below grade level. Our Tier 2 students, the small group instruction, those students are seen 3 to 4 times a week in a small group, and again, those are students that are below average, not as significant as our Tier 3 students, but are definitely in need of some small group instruction to bring their skills up to grade level. And then our Tier 1 include all of the students who are in the general education curriculum. So again, we always aim for about 80% of our students. Don't always get there, but we aim for about 80% of our students to be at Tier 1. This is a definition of RTI that I pulled from the RTI TAC in the practice of providing high-quality instruction and interventions matched to student need. And that's real important and something that even to this day we've been doing RTI for several years. I want to say probably about 8 years, and we still struggle in really ensuring the interventions that we choose for students match student need, that we monitor progress frequently, again matched to the student need, and that we're looking at that data to make decisions about whether or not to change instruction, change the goal, and applying child response data to important education decisions. And it looks like I've lost the connection here for a second, but I think I'm coming back. One thing that we've had some difficulty in some of our meetings is just really ensuring that we really know what specifically the child needs. We're setting that goal to match that child deficit, and then we're monitoring the child's progress in that specific skill area. It's something real important to make sure that we're doing it to every child. 4 essential components of RTI are listed there, and these come from the National Center on Response to Intervention. Really have to have a school-wide, multi-level instructional and preferably behavioral system for preventing school failure. At Fredonia, we do use CBIS along with RTI, and we are implementing the tiers for CBIS as well. Really need to have a screening process. Again, depending on what you use, we do use Ames Web Plus here at Fredonia, but there's others that work as well. And again, you can see those ratings on the National Center to Response to Intervention. Progress monitoring tools need to also align, as well as database decision-making for instruction, because there's really no sense in doing the screening or the progress monitoring if you're not going to use that data to make some decisions about instruction, really moving students within the levels, and then using them in the long run for possible disability identification. Again, making sure that's in accordance with state law. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Tier 1, and these are some recommendations that I have that I've used with different schools across the country looking at the benchmark assessment. So really at Tier 1, you want to make sure that every child is assessed 3 to 4 times a year. We do 3 times a year here at Fredonia. Most schools are able to fit in 3, and if you are able to do 4 times a year, that gives you that much more information. We use Ames Lab. We have used STAR in the past. I know many schools have been very pleased with FastBridge. Dibbles has been used in the past. A lot of those standardized CBM-based assessments are recommended to be done 3 times a year, typically right within a week or 2 when students start school, mid-year, and then again at the end of the year to note progress. A lot of schools are also using local formative assessments or interim assessments to look at the students' progress, especially here in New York State with the Common Core. We have developed interim assessments quarterly that we look at in both reading and in math to line up with our pacing calendar to ensure the students are mastering the standards and the skills recommended. And then a lot of schools and teachers also as well use local assessments, whether we're looking at sight words, classroom assessments. We have more than one piece of data to make an important decision. So those are all used at the Tier 1 level, so every student should be receiving the benchmark assessment, local assessments, and possibly interim assessments. So for Tier 1 services, for these are children requiring monitoring or just regular classroom interventions in ELA, those interventions are provided by the classroom teacher. Those are students that are within the average range. You might need to tweak, differentiate per skill, per day, but typically most of the students can receive the general classroom instruction with the minor interventions. Part of Tier 1 is your grade level meetings, and many of you may call them the PLCs at your school district. That seems to be the buzzword. These typically meet weekly. We do meet weekly here at Fredonia. Our teachers are able to have 1 prep per day, but they are given 2. So during one of the preps per week that they have a 2 prep day, we have our team meet. So for about 40 minutes. Then we do follow a formal agenda, and I'll go through that in just a moment. That the teacher is actually put in a Google file on Google Forms so they can revisit those forms and take a look at it if they have any questions about what might have happened in past meetings. During those meetings, we also review the interim assessment data. We take a look at those by grade level, really to take a look to see how do the students do on the skills and the standards that were measured that quarter, and to talk about if there needs to be some changes at the grade level. We might need some time to revisit a standard or a skill because the majority of students didn't master it. Might be it's a message to us that we need to change our instruction. And we also have grade level action plans based on the data. So we take a look at the standards and the skills that may not have been mastered and come up with some decisions about how we are going to ensure those are mastered. So it might be things like cell work. It might be differentiated groups, really talking about what can we do to ensure that the students can master those skills. And then we take that action plan and look at specific student concerns with a grade level representative before a building level meeting. So somebody from each grade level represents at the data meetings for the whole building, and we look at that data to make sure that we're on the same page. So our team meeting agenda is this. We really focus on these 4 questions. What do we expect students to learn? So where is our pacing calendar? What do we expect them to know? How are we doing with that? How will we know if they learn it? How are we measuring that? How will we know if they are showing us that they've mastered those skills? How do we respond when they don't learn? What are we going to do about it? But also, how do we respond when they do learn, if they already have a skill? How do we keep moving forward? So looking at this, the first one, you can see we review those norms, and that really is looking at those questions and ensuring that everybody knows that they are all treated equally at these meetings. We look at the pacing calendar, and we'll talk a little bit about any difficulties teachers might have had or any supplemental materials teachers may have come up with that they felt really did a nice job meeting the needs of the students. Homework that's sent home. We take a look at what was taught that week and how it went, and if they need to slow down, speed up, how things are going for each particular classroom. We also take a look at math as well, and we talk about how are we doing, what are we doing this week with math, what are the responses of the students to those skills. And then you can see over here in the to-do section, there may be something on the pacing calendar with the ELA. It might be something as simple as copy what Mrs. Jones shared with the group. And that might be the responsibility of Mrs. Jones or Mrs. Miller or somebody like that. So we know leaving there, if there's something to do, it's specifically given to somebody, and then we check in the next week to make sure that we have that done. So the next portion is data discussion. So this is where we will take a look at in the interim assessments. It might be a classroom assessment, and it might even be in prep of one. It might not be the data afterwards, but it might be in prep of one to make sure we're clarifying how these are given or any concerns about particular questions. That's talked about at number 4. And then the to do there, again, might be something as simple as copies are made or take this question off the test, things like that. The bottom portion of the agenda really indicates successes. So what do we feel like happened today that we're happy with? And that the teachers really get a kick out of, and it really focuses on the positive about things they feel like they've accomplished. Focus for next meeting. What do we need to focus on for next meeting given this meeting? Is there data that we need to bring? Are there resources that we need to talk about that came up today? What do we need to bring? Any questions or concerns that arose? And really there's somebody, the teachers either have a person that likes to take notes and that person takes those meeting minutes every week, or they rotate and have somebody different takes those minutes every week. And those questions and concerns are noted throughout the meeting. And then they also note the needs from the building administrators. I am at every team meeting, and so this helps me when I walk away as a reminder, oh yeah, I told them that I would get this for them, or I told them I would look into that. It helps me know what I promised them that I would do so I can make sure that I have effective follow-up. And again, we take this and scan it and put it right in Google Docs, or else the note taker just took it right on her computer and puts it in the Google folder for that particular grade level. This is a copy of our spreadsheet for interim assessment results, and it's just a real little portion of it because these are pretty big. The spreadsheets and the font gets pretty small, but you can see the teachers' names are listed as well as the students' names. This is grade 3 ELA, the second interim assessment. We take a look at the multiple choice. We also have open-ended questions because we wanted to mimic state tests. And then what is listed here are all the standards that were measured by the question. So the teachers, we actually do this through eDoctrina now for the multiple choice, so they can just run it right through the copier. And the teachers can see the wrong answers that were chosen. So that's what these letters are here, the wrong answer that was chosen, so they can see what was the choice, where did the child go wrong. But also they can see if it's blank that the child got it right. This next slide tells you at the bottom of the sheet how many were correct per question, how many were right, and then what is the percentage. So we really focus our action plan on items that are in the yellow or the red because we know those are standards that the students didn't master. So we really talk about, all right, what do we need to do at Tier 1 to make sure that all of our students are mastering what they need to master. And sometimes we'll piggyback on that with the RTI groups to make sure that those students are getting another hit on those particular skills or standards. This is a copy of the grade level action plan. So they're really short and sweet. I really tell the teachers I don't want more than a couple of items on this. I don't want a 5-page document. I really just want a 1-page document because you're continuing on with your pacing calendar and trying to address the needs of all the students. So they pick a standard or two that the students didn't do well on, and then they really look at, you know, what do you think happened? What do you think was the misunderstanding? What was revealed by the data? And that can be by looking at the wrong answer as much as the right answer. And then we talk about what will you do to help students achieve mastery. And a lot of times it does relate to academic vocabulary and really students not understanding words that are in the question. So one of the recommendations here was teach the word accept, work on test-taking strategies and tricky questions, and that tells them to build that into their repertoire during the day. So the kids are having more exposure to that. And then they also wanted to retest the standard on the next assessment to ensure that the students had mastered it. I also have teacher-specific action plans. And this I really leave up to the principal. Initially we were doing this by teacher and it just really got a little bit redundant. So if I have a teacher that's really concerned about how her students did on the interim assessment or on AIMSweb, they'll meet with me and we'll look at their classroom-specific results and we'll create a classroom-specific action plan. All of our RTI teachers have student-specific action plans for their groups, so they know for each group what they're concentrating on specifically. So that this time that spent with the teachers was really worthwhile in brainstorming with them and talking with the teachers about their instruction, that it's not always the student. Sometimes it's just how you're presenting the materials. We then take that information from the interim assessments from your CBM, whether it's AIMSweb or DIBELS, Fastbridge, whatever it might be, and local assessments, and we have a building level data analysis team meeting. And we do these quarterly. The members are listed here that are part of that meeting. I run those meetings typically, and again, I think that it just places how valuable these meetings are and how important this is to our building and to the RTI process. The school psychologist is in attendance, as well as our school counselor. Our school counselor is there for a couple of reasons. We will put in the parking lot any issues that might come up, like attendance or behavioral issues. We just parking lot those issues, so we don't have a huge discussion about it, but the counselor then knows later that she needs to follow up with those teachers about those concerns. So, because sometimes that can impact the student's achievement. The RTI teacher for that particular grade level is in attendance, as well as a special education teacher and the general education grade level representative. We do rotate our grade level representatives at every meeting because the teachers like to be there, and so this allows at least 4 teachers out of 6 to be at one of the meetings throughout the year. All of the other teachers give that grade level representative names of students that they might be particularly concerned about, whether it's to move up a tier, down a tier, as well as data to indicate why. So our schedule, we meet every 10 weeks. It's a full day. We break it into grade level meetings. We use typically, this is one example, it doesn't always run this way, but we typically only spend about 45 minutes in kindergarten and then break the other grade levels down. We have one sub that floats for the grade level representative, and then another sub that floats all day between grade levels for a special education teacher. And then we just cancel our RTI services for that day. At the end of each of our grade level portions, we take about 10 minutes to review the progress of the students with disabilities. And we found this to be real important to give the perspective to the special education teachers on the growth that the students are making. Because what we were finding was if the special education teacher is only exposed to special education students, they don't really have a good perspective where typical students are falling. And we were finding that some of our special education students were achieving higher than our Tier 2 students, yet they were being recommended to be put in a self-contained classroom. So this really helps them to be able to see, all right, where are the typical students? Where are my students? What might be some recommendations for services that I make for my students, as well as IEP goals? So it really helps drive these goals and helps with the perspective for the gen ed teacher as well, because sometimes we'll say, well, how does this student compare to the students in the self-contained room? And the special ed teacher will be able to say, well, this is the level that my students are at, and compare it to how the student that we're asking about is doing. So this is a database that we would bring at Tier 1 to our building level meeting. And so you can see the students will all be listed, the teachers will all be listed, and we typically sort it by data. We can take a look and really start with the lowest kids and move to the highest kids. So we'll take a look. This is September RCBM data, November RCBM data, January RCBM data, so we can see growth. We will include running record information at times. This is the interim assessment data. And you can see then the recommendations. So we'll start with each child, and we really move quickly. We determine cut scores for each measure. So we'll look at a cut score for RCBM, and typically we'll use the AIMSweb national norm. We'll look at a cut score for interim, and we'll look at a cut score for running records, sight words, whatever the other measures might be. So we can say this is a, at tier 3, this is definitely, if the child is below this level, they're definitely tier 3, especially if they're below that level on every measure. And then maybe if they're below that level on 2 out of 3 measures, they'll be tier 3. We come up with those determinations before we even start, so we can look at each child and just really quickly just use the data and say, all right, they're in the red, they're below the 10th percentile on every measure, they're automatically a tier 3. And you can see here the SAT in parentheses. If we have a student that really hasn't made progress, we can see that their growth has just not been there. This particular student you can see, we'll want them to go to SAT, which is our student assistance team. So we can look at even more intense interventions and really monitor those students with the parents present as well. So as noted, we review the ELA data first. We establish the cut scores for tier 2 and tier 3. And then we review individual scores and areas of strengths and weaknesses. And we base those RTI groups then on skill deficit areas. So our RTI providers know, all right, I need to have a fluency group at first grade, maybe I need 6 fluency groups, whatever it happens to be for tier 2 or tier 3. Might need a comprehension group, I might need a sight word group, but we really try and group those students together based on their skill deficit areas. Then we look at the math data, again establishing the cut scores for tier 2 and tier 3 before we even start, and then looking at individual scores and areas of strengths and weaknesses. And again, group the students based on skill deficit areas. So we are providing RTI in math as well. And here's another database for 3rd grade. So you can take a look at some of the measures that we use. We had the New York State math scores, an MComp we were using at that time. This is a couple years old. My math was the math series we were using at that time, the interims. So you can see some of that information. So the principal's role at this meeting is really to keep a good pace. You saw our timeline, so if we only have about 45 minutes to talk about all the students, ELA, math, and then special ed, we got to move. We got to keep a good pace. So if things come up, that like attendance or behavior issues, we put it in the parking lot, and we don't ignore it, but we say this isn't the time or the place. We'll address that in another meeting at another time with a counselor. Really, the principal needs to be firm about cut score decisions because we're using that data to drive instruction, and every child has the same measures. So we can't be wishy-washy because otherwise we'll end up with more kids in tier 3 or tier 2 that really belong there. Really, the principal's role is to ensure those cut scores are accurate too, that they're not too out of line. Principal really needs to deter outside distractors. So if things are coming up, like to talk about parents being divorced or whatever it happens to be, that's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about the data. Really, the principal determines if the SAT meeting should be held. Do we need to hold an SAT meeting? Has the child not made progress? Are they not indicating progress? So really making that determination. And then giving those referrals for attendance, counseling, whatnot. And then after each meeting, I email the data right after the meeting to each grade level team so they know right away what the recommendations are from the data analysis team. They know right away. So for tier 2, define, again, hopefully if you have any questions about tier 1, please let me know now. I'm going to move into some specifics for tier 2. Just shoot me a question real quick. I'll give you a second or two. All right. I'm going to keep going then. All right, tier 2. So tier 2 is really looking at the core curriculum group, a small group differentiation, plus additional instruction is targeted and definable for students who are at risk for maintaining the state standards of proficiency. So they're getting that core curriculum in the classroom. They're not being pulled out during that time. They may be getting some differentiation, whether it's through guided reading, reading groups, but they're also getting that additional instruction, that 3 or 4 times a week of additional instruction on top of the ELD reading instruction. At Fredonia, we look at moderate levels of delay. Typically, it's 3 times a week. There's not very many that are only seen 2 times a week, but we really try to keep the groups of no more than 4. And the intervention is provided, and actually I should say this is outside of the 90-minute ELA block. And the intervention is provided by reading teachers, special education teachers, ELL teachers, and occasionally but rarely a speech teacher. And this is an example of what a plan might look like, and this actually comes from Minnesota, looking at a particular student, bringing them at Tier 2. What's the problem? How do I identify it? Looking at the problem analysis, what do we think is going on? What is the goal? What would the interventions be? And how are you going to measure them? And then how are you going to decide if it's working or not? Are you going to use a slope trend analysis? Are you going to look at a consecutive data point rule? So if there are certain data points for 4 consecutive measures, you'll be making a decision. Are you looking at a particular level of performance? What are you using to make that decision? I like this one, so I threw it into as another option to look at. And honestly, anything that I use and I have used at this school or any school I work at is really a compilation of other forms and other schools' use of materials and making it my own into something that I like that's useful for me and for my school. So at Tier 2, really looking at some things that you can do with the teachers and to obtain some better relationships is having teachers provide examples of Tier 2 interventions at staff meetings. Have them name some things or talk about some things that may have come up at a grade level meeting that they've seen as successful. Maybe come up with an intervention of the month. I've had RTI providers provide something that they found to be real successful at a grade level meeting that could be implemented at Tier 2 with Tier 2 students. Train grade level team facilitators in data interpretation. So when you're having those grade level meetings, it's more than just you or the school psychologist talking about the data, that more than you know what it means and how to use the data. Providing opportunities to network with other team leaders. And we meet once a month, all of our team leaders, so they can really talk about what they're doing, what their role is, how to service their grade level better. We have a team leader for each grade level, and this really helps them have that time together to ask each other questions and support each other. And then this is just really celebrating success whenever you can, bringing that data up at grade level meetings or at staff meetings and really showing the growth of the students. This is so much fun to do, really showing how much progress the students are making and then celebrating that. Some challenges at Tier 2, really, again, talking about the kid more than talking about group support. And that's really where my role comes in at these meetings and saying, we're talking about the group instruction, we're talking about the data, we're not talking about the kid. We call that the BMW time, the bitch, moan, whine time. We're not doing that. We're just talking about the data and what we can do to be positive problem solvers. So we really want to increase the time talking about how to act on the group needs. What can we do to make sure that all of the kids are making the progress? What interventions might need to be looked at or revised? So looking at Tier 3 services at Fredonia, and again, if you have any questions about Tier 2, let me know. Shoot me a question and let me know. I'm happy to answer it. And then I'll go into looking at Tier 3. All right. So for children with significant delays, and I mentioned the fact that we look at below the 10th percentile on the AIMSA Plus data, but also significantly below grade level on their interim quarterly assessment. These students are seen 5 times a week for 30 minutes, either individually or in groups no larger than 2. And what we found by doing that is that the students make progress much more quickly if they're going to make progress and respond to the interventions. And this is definitely supplemental to the 90 to 120-minute ELA block. We do have 120 minutes in kindergarten and first grade, and then unfortunately lose time when students get older in the upper grades. But the students are monitored weekly. We check their progress. We make sure that they're really working towards that goal. And we take a look monthly at our grade level meetings to see if that weekly progress monitoring is successful. So we don't want to wait too long and have those students not making the progress they all need to make. The interventions are provided by the reading, special education, English language teachers, or by speech teachers. So some challenges at Tier 3, there is never enough time in the day. So we try and brainstorm a lot, whether it's at our grade level meetings or the building level data meetings. You know, we're talking about seeing students individually or seeing students in very small groups of 2. So how do we find that time to do those interventions and getting creative with that? And we do have daily physical education here at our school, and that's something that really helps these kids. So we don't want to give up that. So we've talked about trying to get creative, whether we see those students right off the bus, whether we see those students maybe once, during part of lunch, or just really breaking down that transition time. We found that we just didn't have enough time in the day for a lot of things. So I sat with every teacher and looked at their schedule and looked at how much time they were given to transition. And sometimes they were given 10 or 15 minutes several times a day to transition between subjects. And we don't have that much time to give. We don't. So by really condensing their schedules, giving a couple minutes to stretch and to maybe do a brain break and moving on, and really encouraging hands-on activities during ELA, math, science, and social studies help. But really taking a look at those schedules and condensing those. But again, holding meetings was difficult. People don't like them and often can't stay after school or before school. So that was difficult, so we really decided during the day helped, and everybody was here, and finding a sub, it was easier to find a sub to cover those meetings than it was to try and piecemeal a meeting here and a meeting there. It's hard sometimes to conduct additional assessments. When do we have time to do that? How can we do that? When can we do that? And sometimes we will have students stay after school and have parents come get them, or we'll have to do it during the library time, maybe just right outside the library, or trying to get creative. We really need to make sure that those students at Tier 3 are receiving more intensive and targeted intervention than the Tier 2 students. We were having some difficulties at one point that it looked pretty similar, and they really needed to look different because we wanted to ensure that students were truly Tier 3, that they got something more intense than the students at Tier 2 more often. So that we've really worked on hard. Really prioritizing and remaining focused on students with the most intense needs, rather than just briefly touching on large number of students. We really talk about every student, but we keep it data-based. We really focus on the data, focus on the specific skill needs of the students, and address it. And you can see we document everything. We have forms to document, whether it's at Tier 1 with our grade level meetings, at Tier 2 with our building level meetings. They're documenting their action plans. And I'm not talking about a lot of busy paperwork. It's things that are meaningful. And we try and keep everything in Google Docs so it's transparent. So any teacher in that grade level can access that information. If they have questions or they have concerns or they forgot what we talked about, all of that information is accessible. I tell the teachers all the time, I don't want the paper on my desk. I need it for it to be transparent to you, for you to be able to go back and look at it. The action plans that they create at Tier 1, we review probably every 3 to 4 weeks to ensure that we're doing what we said we were doing and looking at our progress. As well as I noted that we look at the Tier 2 and the Tier 3 progress monitoring at grade level about every month. Once a month, we typically do it the first team meeting of the month to ensure that the students are making progress. Because we want to catch anybody if they're flatlining, if they really haven't shown any growth, what's going on. And maybe it is attendance, maybe it's something else, and we try and address it before it's too late or too much time has gone by. Tier 3 buy-in is usually needed in the area of ambitious goal setting. I know a lot of times teachers will tell me, there's no way that the child can meet that goal. But what we found is if we're not ambitious with that goal setting, the gap will never close. So we need to be ambitious, and that's why that Tier 3 is so important, to make sure that intervention is intense, that it's targeted, and that you have a small group so you can really focus on those needs of those specific students. So then those ambitious goals are more reachable. That also brings you to the value of frequent data collection, because if you have ambitious goals, you are using those resources with those students so frequently, that's a huge resource to meet with 1 or 2 students for 30 minutes a day, all day long. You need to collect data frequently so you know if what you're doing is successful or not. I don't know any teachers that don't work really hard to try to meet the goals of their students and make sure that they're successful. So looking at goals, having buy-in for the goal setting, we have done a lot of professional development on appropriately setting goals, really looking at progress monitoring charts, looking at rates of improvement, looking at how we can close our gaps, because we really see that kids can do it. We can really see that kids can do it. They can meet the goals. So we've shared the growth of all students that they make, like at first grade, we'll look at sight words. How many sight words have they gained? And it seems way too ambitious when we're looking at it in September. But when we look at the data over several years, we can see that about 85 to 90% of our students achieve that goal. So really looking at your rate of improvement, as well as the special education rate of improvement, because it's impressive to see how many special education students meet those goals if you set them and if you tell them that they can do it. I'll never forget working with one population. This is actually a high school Down syndrome girl. And we had to keep changing her goal. And initially the teacher was just real frustrated. There's no way that this child can meet this fluency goal. We shared it. We were explicit with the student, explicit instructions towards improving her fluency. And we had to keep raising her goal because she kept meeting it. And she was ecstatic and so pleased. And the teacher felt great too because she knew that the time and the energy and the intervention she was implementing was working. And so then we could turn our focus to other areas that the child needed. So really looking at rate of improvement. So when we're looking at goal setting, you can see this is an Ames Web chart here. The black line is the goal line. The dotted line is the actual trend line of the student, with the red dots being the measurement of the child. So there will be pushback. I'm still getting pushback about setting ambitious goals. And sometimes the culture is that, because they want to ensure that the goals are met. And sometimes when you have ambitious goals, they're not met. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to strive for them. So we've really worked on culture in our district. Our district population has changed quite a bit over the last 5 years. We've increased our free and reduced lunch by about 30%. So really taking a look at the culture that's in your building was real important, and looking at the goals. Don't set the goals too low. Yes, they'll meet them, but the child will never close the gap between himself and his peers. Okay. So to increase the perceived value of weekly data collection, teachers will talk about how good the students feel when they're looking at the weekly data, when they are seeing the growth of the students, and the students look at their charts and the students are able to show their parents how well they're doing. So making a flip video, we did that, and we took a teacher testimonial of this is really working. My kids are excited. They like to get the weekly progress monitoring because they want to challenge themselves and see how much more growth they can make every week. I remember walking into a school in Iowa, and all of their charts were posted along the walls, and the kids were so excited to show me about how much growth they had made with their reading fluency, and they were so proud of themselves, and they challenged themselves every week to do better, and it was really, really pretty amazing. And remember, that if you're monitoring students with IEPs, that this is just great data to use for goal reporting. You really are looking to see, are the students working towards their goals? Are they going to achieve that IEP goal? Was it a realistic goal? And then when you're writing the next goal, you know whether to make it as ambitious, more ambitious, or maybe slightly less ambitious. It really helps you to have that data to drive that decision. So here's some general guidelines based on best practices and research as far as how often you monitor what the reliability is of that data. So if you're only monitoring twice a week, after about 4 weeks, and this is really looking at the RCDM, so Ames Web Plus or oral reading fluency, if you do it 2 times a week after about 4 weeks, that's okay. After 6 weeks, it's excellent data, and so on and so forth. And you can see the less that you progress monitor, the less valid that your data is. So you really want to try and monitor. If you're monitoring once a week, you really want to wait until about 8 weeks to make decisions. If you're only able to do it every 10 days, you really need to wait until after 10 weeks, and so on and so forth. So really, the more data that you have, the better decisions that you can make. This chart is real helpful to show if people are arguing about having frequent progress monitoring. This tells you the validity behind it. So here's some nuances that may impact decision making. So you want to look at the decision. All right, are all the data points below the aim line? We're trying to make this goal and they're all below it. Or if the trend is clearly heading down in the wrong direction, you may need additional data. You also probably need to think about changing your intervention. It depends on how many data points that you have. If you are here and you know that you've got some excellent data, they're all below the aiming line, the trend is clearly heading down, that intervention needs to be changed. If it's been happening for a while, you change that intervention, that child may need to have more intensive instruction. On the other hand, if all the data points are above the aiming line, the trend is clearly going through the roof, then you know that that intervention is working. You're doing the right thing. In key instances where the trend's like right above or right below that aim line, how long do you want to keep a student there? It could potentially be ineffective before a change is made, and this is especially true if you have a flat aim line. So this really helps you know if you have enough data points to make a good decision or not. So the consequences of poor decisions are worse for kids not making progress than those making progress, obviously. If a child's flatlining or going the wrong direction, you really need to make some tough decisions about whether that intervention needs to be changed, modified, or if they need to be in a more intensive tier. Contrast, you also don't want to make a decision too soon because you don't want to judge that the program's working, but you just don't have enough data points. So you want to make sure you have enough data points before you make those decisions. So after a couple of days, I would wait. I wouldn't use a couple of data points. It might tell you a trend that it's going, and you can ask some questions about the validity and the fidelity of the intervention, but really make sure that you have enough data points to make the decision. I'm going to talk a little bit about our SAT process. The SAT process, as you noted from our data meetings, students are referred to the student assistance team based on data analysis decisions. Teachers don't refer directly to student assistance team. That comes only from our building level data meetings. So we can look at the progress of a student over time and determine if we need to do something more for that child. We typically hold our student assistance team, our SATs, one day. We schedule them every 45 minutes, again, getting 2 subs, one for the gen ed teacher and one for the special ed teacher. And the members that are part of our student assistance team are here. Some of you might call them child study teams. Some of you might call them instructional support teams. Just depends on your district. But we always have the classroom teacher present, the special education teacher representative, typically that works with that grade level child. Always invite the parents. If they can't come, we try and see if they can do a phone conference, so at least they can hear the information and we can send it home afterwards. RTI teachers are there, OTPT speech teachers if appropriate, the school psychologist and the school counselor, and again, I run those meetings. Again, I noted that the referral comes from our data analysis team. Parents are notified by the classroom teacher. We ask the classroom teachers to give the parents a phone call. And we also have an informational brochure that tells them about our process. So when a parent comes in, they know what their role is. They know what the meeting will look like. They know what the outcomes should be, what we're looking to do, what the purposes of those meetings. The teacher completes, we have the SAT forms all electronically on Google Docs. The teacher will complete the initial portion of that and send it either to me as a principal or the school psychologist, so we can have that form ready for the meeting. And sometimes the teacher needs help embedding Ames Web graphs, whatever it might be. So I'm going to show you that form and tell you a little bit about what that looks like. So the teacher fills out this portion of the form. They list the personal information here, who they are. If it was them making the referral through the data assistance team, sometimes it's the occupational therapist, sometimes it's the parent. They'll note if the child's been retained or not. Hopefully it's not, unless they're from a different school, because we really don't retain students. They'll note if there's medical issues and if the child's on any medication, and then if they receive any other services, whether they're getting RTI, OT, PT, speech, anything like that. And then they will indicate the date of the meeting, and then I will fill out who is in attendance when we actually have the meeting. I take this form and I put it on a projector, so it's projected in a whiteboard during the meeting, so the parent and everybody else in the room can see the form as it's being filled out. So if there's any questions or concerns about what's being put on the form, everybody is visible to everybody in the room. Before the meeting, the teacher fills out this portion. What can a student do? We always like to start with a positive. So we have the teacher fill out at least 3 skills that the student does well. What can they do well? And then we have the teacher indicate at least one area of concern. What do they need to improve? They describe it, and then we ask them to use data to show those present levels of performance. Again, they'll either put in the Ames Web graph, progress monitoring graph. They'll put that information in here, as well as any other assessments, whether it might be sight words, it might be a speech-language screening, what other assessments have been done for that child prior to the meeting. So we can start the meeting right away by going through the information on the prior page, personal information, and then diving right into what are the skills that the child has, what don't they have, where do we need to focus. So looking at the next page, I think I might have one. Nope. So looking at that. So at that meeting, actually I did skip a portion, I apologize. We do start by brainstorming. We take a look at what do we think is happening for this child? What do we think is going on? Might it be that they skipped kindergarten? Might it be that they were premature and had to be in neonatal care for the first 6 months of life? Maybe the child was diagnosed with ADHD. That's where it really helps having the parent present, because a lot of those things that we wouldn't know as school employees, they're able to fill in. And then we really target one area. We pick one area based on what the teacher filled out to target for that meeting. And we brainstorm interventions based on that specific skill deficit, also knowing some of the brainstorm information that we had from the parent and the teacher during the brainstorming session. So we go through the brainstorming, and then we allow the teacher and the parent to choose the interventions that they feel like they can do. And sometimes we'll have interventions that are done in the regular classroom, as well as interventions that are being done specific at the RTI setting. And also interventions at home. And the intervention at home might just be checking over homework. Might be reading with a child 20 minutes at night. It might be taking child to the doctor for a vision evaluation. Those may be specific parent interventions. But we also set the goal specific to that child's needs. So if it was sight words, if it was vocabulary, if it was fluency, we make sure that intervention and goal are aligned to that deficit area. The progress monitoring is scheduled as well that matches that intervention and goal. So if the RTI teacher is working on fluency and maybe they're doing Orton-Gillingham with a child and they're really focusing on phonemic awareness to improve their reading fluency, that child is progress monitored then in the reading fluency, because we know that's where the deficit is. That's where we need to see if they're making improvement. We also know how often is the child being progress monitored. Are they being progress monitored twice a week, once a week? When are they being progress monitored? Right there on the form, everybody knows when it's happening, and we can come back and know how many data points that we'll have for the next meeting. So we do schedule the follow-up meeting. We find a time that the parent's available, what works for the teacher, also knowing that we have enough time to get the data points we need. So we're not going to schedule a follow-up in 2 weeks. We're really going to say, are we progress monitoring the student twice a week? We really want 8 data points, so 4 weeks from now might be sufficient. just depending on how much progress monitoring we're doing. We print the minutes immediately, give that right to the parent before they walk out the door, and we email the minutes to the FHE team so they have them before they even get back to their classroom. Any questions about that SAT process? And again, that's primarily for students who have not been successful at Tier 3, given their rate of improvement. If it's a child that is really flatlined, we may take them to SAT quicker than somebody that may have been hovering around that trend line but it isn't closing the gap. That child, we may give a few more rounds of interventions to see if we can find an intervention that really meets their needs. So how do we fit it all in? How do we do all of that? How do we fit in the Tier 3? We really need to talk about those interventions, making sure that the teachers have time to do them, that we're collecting the data, and that we're really having those team meetings to analyze that Tier 3 data. So they're looking at themselves, they're asking for help if they need it, they're asking questions. We're really trying to make sure all of these things fit in Tier 3. So fitting in interventions, we have really set aside time blocks for our students to be pulled for RTI. So they may know, all right, our students in Mrs. Jones' second grade class, her students are being seen from 9 to 9:30 for a fluency group. She may have another group pulled from 10 to 10:30, and it really helps the teacher then know when to schedule their primary instruction so it does not interfere. Fitting in the data collection, we've had it where sometimes RTI teachers have a data day. Once a week they have a data day, and they really take time to progress monitor and collect that data. Or I've had other teachers test one student at the end of our small group each day, so all the students are tested by the end of the week, and that only takes a minute or two. And then fitting in those data team meetings are right on our school calendar, and we schedule those really about every 8 to 10 weeks now, and we look exclusively at Tier 3 data. We do a lot of professional development during our staff meetings. We go over, we still do reminders about the RTI process, about problem solving, about how to collect data, about looking at data points. We'll do some quick reviews constantly about what we're doing, and we may do it during a PLC or a team meeting as well. So some words of wisdom. As far as administrators go, and we've found this especially working through the TAC, that if an administrator is involved in the RTI process and shows how important and valuable it is to the students in your building, teachers know that that is an important feature and they need to take it seriously, and they need to take it to heart. They need to really look at the data, and they know how important it is if you're taking the time to be a major part of the RTI process. Another thing that we've seen is that the RTI model encompasses just about every best practice seen in successful schools. It looks at database decision making. It looks at consistency across grade level. It looks at explicit instruction. It looks at research-based curriculum, whether it's Tier 1 or Tier 3. Really looks at almost every best practice seen in successful schools, and especially when you accompany it with a behavior model and have it be more of a multi-tiered system of support. Really encompasses just about every best practice that there is. I'm a chapter review editor for best practices in school psychology, and looking at every chapter, I think about how does it relate to RTI, and really RTI is the umbrella that everything falls under. So making good RTI procedures a priority will help just about every student in your school. So that is the webinar for today. I did not see any questions, but I'm hoping that as you reflect on the information that I shared, that you can think about how this relates to your school, your students, and if you have any questions or concerns about how you might implement it where you live, where you are. As I noted, I've worked in many districts, whether it was as a consultant or as a school psychologist or as an administrator, and every school has tweaked the RTI process to meet the needs of their population, whether it's their teachers or their students. But good RTI processes they even look at every year or within the year to ensure that student achievement is being positively impacted. So I'm going to give you a few minutes here if you have questions. I would love to be able to help you a little bit more in implementing this, not only at the administrative level, but district level, anything that I can do to help, because this is just such good practices for students. On your data sheets, who does the data entry? Great question. So we use eDoctrina, and so the students actually have a bubble sheet that they fill in for the multiple choice questions, and we run it through eDoctrina on the copier, and it puts it right into eDoctrina. Prior to that, though, the teachers did the data entry. They entered every student after each interim assessment. Now, if we're looking at the building level data sheets, those are done by the RTI providers. They put in all of that information for the grade level that they work with. So if you weren't here last time, I noted that I have one interventionist that works with kindergarten, and so she would put in the data for the building-wide data analysis meeting for kindergarten. The teachers would give her all the data, she didn't put it. And the same for first grade. I have one interventionist that will input all that data. They love looking at it and doing it and sorting it and color coding it. It actually cracks me up. I think they have a little challenge between each other. And for second and third grade, I have one interventionist that works with ELA reading at second and third grade. She inputs that data, and another interventionist that does the math. And fourth grade, I have one lady that does both, and she inputs all of that data. So they like to look at it because and they like to keep it ongoing because it really helps them know the students that are making progress. And I can see you're typing, but we did have a little bit of pushback when we initially started doing this because it is time intensive. But once teachers were able to see the value of having all of that data, they came back to me and said it's worth it. Now, it took about a year, and it took several meetings, but they were able to see how much more efficient they were once they had that data in one place, and how helpful it is, especially as we're able to sort it and color code it, to really quickly go through those data meetings. And it's great to look at it as a grade level, because sometimes teachers will look at their class and think that students are super low or super high, but when they have the perspective of the whole grade level, or even state or national norms based on that particular assessment, it helps them to be able to have a little bit of a better perspective for their students. So hopefully that answered that question. All right, so do you often run into students who receive multiple supports, reading, math, OT, and then yes, we definitely have scheduling issues when it comes to that. And that's where we really all sit at the table and take a look at, where can we, so how can we get creative? Sometimes we'll have students come right in and get their breakfast and take it right to the math interventionist, and they're working while the rest of the students are doing bell work in the classroom. We've also done some co-treat where we have students, particularly with ELL, that they might receive both ELL and RTI services at the same time. We've had our OT and PT co-treat where they're receiving both OT and PT at the same time, when we just had to change IEPs. So it really takes creativity, but what we found is if we can do it at a grade level meeting with all of the teachers present, the brainstorming that happens and the creativity is great, especially if maybe we have two students from two separate classrooms and they're friends. So they might not mind missing part of lunch if they're going with their friend to receive RTI. Things like that, as long as we get parental permission. And we keep parents in the loop on all of those decisions so they know when they're receiving the support. We do have our middle school and high school students start about an hour earlier than our elementary students on occasion, but rarely. When we have a student receiving just about every service, we've had those students come in about an hour earlier. and receive some of the services from the providers that are already there at that hour. That's helped as well. Any other questions, thoughts, or concerns? I'd love, the more you think about it and how you can implement it in your classroom or tweak it to meet the needs of your student, I think it'd be more helpful. Any other questions or concerns? Well, I really appreciate everybody coming today. Hopefully you'll come back next week as we look a little bit further into scheduling and some more specifics with RTI, especially at the administrative level. Thanks for coming.
Yep, and I just want to thank everyone again and remind you that there's a link to a survey at the bottom of the screen. It says Webinar Feedback Survey. If you could please take a moment and take that survey. Your feedback is important to us for informing what we're doing with the webinar. So thank you again for attending.